Welcome back, adventurers, once again to Let's Play ChäoS. And in the last episode, Sewer kept, well, I wouldn't necessarily say pestering, even though that's essentially what it was doing to Ayase when he was trying to get some more information both on Takumi and the situation in general. But before he was able to question it further, he got a phone call from quote-unquote someone and, well, decided to close off the interview there, much to Ayase's eternal relief. Meanwhile, back over at Takumi's hideout, he spent the night watching, or rewatching an episode of Bloodshun, and, well, the thought came to his mind that maybe all this might have something to do with a grade 4 paper that he wrote a very long time ago. A piece titled rather ominously, "Whose Eyes Are Those Eyes?" The very same words that have been appearing throughout Shibuya and have unfortunately been attributed to the New Gen incidents. Not to mention the fact that that phrase had actually appeared twice, both in the group dive incident as well as being scrawled on the wall of the Vampire House incident, which was case number 4, I think. It's been quite a while. But hopefully Takumi can find something in his little childhood scribblings that might shed some light on the matter. Something Shogun would have good reason to be picky about. The meaning of what the old homeless guy had said, the most special among you. The one who first came up with the phrase, "Whose eyes are those eyes?" In other words, Takumi himself. I caught my breath nervously and began reading with great care, so not as to overlook a single word. Seems like Takumi is having trouble digging into the mind of his childhood self. The only thing I grasped for sure was that I'd sensed God's gaze back then, which, well, par for the course, really. Maybe I've been quite the weirdo as the kid. Not much has changed since then, either. In any case, it was simply impossible to try reading something into these incomprehensible contents. And yet, it's probably not wise to dismiss them so easily either. It seemed like it'd be more of a handful than deciphering hieroglyphics. Not that you could actually read hieroglyphics unless you actually happen to be rather fluent on the subject, to which I would actually commend you. That was when I suddenly noticed there was a doodle on the back of the essay. Come to think of it, I loved scribbling at the time, hadn't I? That you did. For instance, I'd always draw little mustaches and sunglasses on the facial photographs of the great historical figures who appeared in my social studies textbooks, and I'd use the corners of my notebook for flipbook drawings. Those were fairly popular back in the day. Drawing became more and more fun to me, to the point that eventually someone brought me a sketchbook, probably your parents. Also yet another talent that you didn't realize you had, or remembered you had, I should say. Meh, not that anyone had ever praised me as being good at art. You're not the first, and you certainly won't be the last that happens. As I soaked in nostalgia, I flipped the paper over to see what was drawn there. Curious and ominous. It was a cryptic scribble. Some weird-looking spider-esque type drawing. It was cryptic, but included just one thing I'd seen very recently. Can you see what I see, adventurers, with these eyes?
Ir2
IR2, which just so happens to be the title of this chapter, which is not the first time that we've seen this. Was it an equation or something with separate significance, or no more than a meaningless string of letters and numbers? Be that as it may, Takumi Nishijo, it isn't the first time that we've seen it, nor is it the last time that we've seen it. If that makes any sense at all, which I hope it does. I didn't know. But indeed, the very first encounter with Shogun, he used that very same equation. And it was the same as the equation Shogun had posted out of the blue when he first made contact with me in the chat. Same as doesn't enter into it. It's the exact same formula, quote unquote. Now, as much as I would love to put in the fun song again, it is unfortunately copyrighted since it is the property of Mr. SpongeBob SquarePants, and so I won't be doing that this time. Once was enough. But there is also something else familiar about this sketch other than the cryptic formula, which is very important, the significance of which will definitely mean a lot throughout the rest of this ordeal. But this spider, and indeed this essay, we've seen it before. Many, many, many times before. Because if you've been paying attention, adventurers, this sketch appears every single time that Takumi Nishijo has ever had a daydream or a delusion. Every time. Well, there have been certain instances in which that hasn't happened, but every single transition, this image has appeared at the back of his mind. Yeah, it all connects. The threads are starting to come together. Whose eyes are those eyes? And IR2. Two key phrases I found in an essay I'd written years ago. Key phrases I myself had forgotten. If Shogun knew them, it meant he must truly be making secret recordings of my thoughts, which is entirely possible. Of course, if Yua Kusunoki saw this, it would put her own pet theory into effect yet again. Something strange is truly unfolding here. And meanwhile, Ban has made another trip over to the Frisia building. Ban read a file with ferocious intensity in Frisia's reception room, although it was one in name only, being a narrow space set apart by shelving. And Yua's still here, apparently. Opposite him, Yua shrank into herself where she sat. She was incessantly peeking at Ban's expression for a while now. She was the very picture of a child showing her report card to her parent, which is probably a very good analogy given the situation. Except that Ban is neither her parent nor her guardian, obviously. Ban was reading a report on everything Yua had investigated up until now regarding the new gen cases and Takumi Nishijo. Oh dear. Think it's suffice to say that Takumi's days are quote-unquote numbered. including things like a log of the chat between Takumi and Shogun on the day before the staking incident. Yua had concluded that Takumi really was the true new-gen culprit.
すごいわね。これ全部一人で調べたの？
はい、一応。
She's been investigating all by her lonesome. Yua lowered her face apologetically even in response to Momose's words of admiration. She ended up gazing at the bag she'd left at her feet and the Gero froggy straps that hung from it. She was dealing with a detective and the president of an investigations company. They were the ultimate pros when it came to investigating. It would be unavoidable for these two to regard it as child's play any information Yua, a mere ordinary high school girl, had independently discovered. Not these two, however. Yua, I think they're taking your information very seriously, which unfortunately does not bode well for Takumi. In fact, it's a proverbial death sentence. But Ban, like Momose, was impressed by the high quality of her report. She has done a lot of investigating.
なかなかいい着眼点だ。よく調べたな。とりわけこの西条匠の多重性ってのが興味深い。西条匠は多重人格であり、オリジナルとなった西条匠の人格が眠っている時、つまり他の人格が活動中に事件を起こしている。
Yeah, Yua is still intent on pursuing her theories through to the end.
本当に面白いわ。
And unfortunately, they're not so easily disprovable, despite the fact that Takumi has a lack of diagnosed sleepwalking.
まあでも、ちょっとばかり現実離れしすぎてるかな。
That is the first bit of criticism that Ban has leveled Yua's way, which is probably going to earn an irritated look from Momose.
刑事さんはその西条くんのこと犯人だって考えてないんですか？
That would be the case if there were maybe one or two crimes, but yeah, there are actually too many instances to count. Not that, well, in certain situations, Yua's information would be right on the money, but there are too many different elements to the new-gen crimes alone that would suggest that Takumi is the criminal.
はっきり言っていいかい？
Ban's certainly not going to be mincing his words here. Yua nodded, her face going a bit stiff.
警察じゃ西条匠は容疑者として見ていない。
Oh dear.
へえ、そうなの。
Momose doesn't seem too surprised, however, by Ban's statement of admission there. But believe it or not, Ban's statement is not reflective wholly of the police's refusal to investigate him. Not only Yua, but also Momose widened her eyes. Ban grinned ruefully. Leaning against the back of the sofa, he folded his hands behind his head.
少なくとも貼り付け事件じゃ西条は白だ。遺体を貼り付けていた杭には指紋がべったり付着しててな。
Fingerprints. Well, Takumi did end up taking one of the stakes home, or at least a stake that had either fallen to the ground or had been left there on the ground.
西条の指紋を手に入れて照合してみたんだが、全く合致しなかった。
In other words, the person that pinned poor Professor Ua to the wall there in the alleyway was not Takumi Nishijo. Of course, there is the possibility, a very slim but likely possibility, that the fingerprints on the murder weapons were, well, actually the stakes were not the murder weapons. Ua was strangled, not impaled, but I digress. Anyway, going back to my original supposition, the prints could be plants, but it's doubtful.
そん
And of course, in regards to the other New Gen incidents, it will be very hard to try and link Takumi up with them as well. The staking was only one such incident. But that isn't to say that Takumi isn't involved. But I digress. Yura immediately went pale and her lips started trembling. Now everything she believed had come clattering down. Guilt over the horrible things she said to Takumi advanced on her heart.
杭にあった指紋から容疑者についてはほぼ固まってんだ。
And pray tell whose fingerprints are those?
まだマスコミにも公表してねえけどな。ちなみにそれ、諏訪のお手柄だったりする。
So it was Sua who found the fingerprints. Interesting.
スワちゃんは頑張ってるっていうのに、バンちゃんはよくここでのんびりしていられるわね。
You say that, but you don't realize that at this very moment, Sua is chatting up Ayase over at the hospital.
実は俺、捜査本部から外されたんだわ。
I would say that I'm surprised, but I'm not.
はあ
Bond's been removed from the New Gen investigations entirely.
本来の捜査サボって G レートのこととか調べてんの上司にバレちゃってな。
That was the reason why Bond wanted to tell his junior Sua that there was no need to go so far as calling in to inform him of the seventh case.
あんたね、もっとうまく立ち回りなさいよ。
You might want to try telling that to the rest of the police force.
まあバンちゃんに G レートのことを教えた私にも責任はあるけど。
Yeah, because something tells me that if Bond was busy investigating what his superiors had ordered him to investigate, it would have led him somewhere, but not anywhere near to the true culprits of New Gen.
気にすんなって。
But that's what you get when you're only investigating a certain angle, after all.
それに G レートの件は個人的にも気になってたんだ。
You were still shaken.
まあ、西条にしても貼り付け以外の事件じゃまだ捜査線上にいる。もしかするとユアちゃんの推理が正しいかもしれん。
ニュージェネは同一犯による連続殺人事件じゃないって警察は考えてるの？
That's precisely what is so curious about all this.
まだなんとも。
Of course, Bond still has no either or.
ただ、ついさっき第7の事件が起きたようだしな。個人的には犯人は複数いると思ってる。いろいろ喋っちまった。口外したって知られたらクビになっちまう。今のはオフレコな。
I think it's probably too little too late for that. Bond mischievously pressed his pointer finger to his lips.
で、本題なんだが。
Yua tilted her head in surprise, as she'd been convinced the previous conversation was the reason they'd summoned her here. Seems like Bond has something else that he wants to talk about.
聞きたいことってのは学校のことなんだよ。ユアちゃんは青井瀬名って子知ってるかい？
Ah, so he has managed to get some leads.
君の同級生のはずなんだが。
After some thought, Yua shook her head regretfully. Indeed, I doubt that she has actually crossed paths with Senna the entire time they've been in Sume Academy, and the same could be said of Ayase as well.
名前は聞いたことがあるような気がしますけど、話したことはありません。
ああ、そうか。
その人が犯人なんですか？
ああ、全くの別件だ。昨日徹夜したのもその子のこと調べてたからでな。
あんたさっき女子高生の生態がどうとかって。
Ban grinned and winked at the puzzled Momose. Then he swiftly turned back to face Yua. That could be misconstrued as something entirely different, which doesn't bode well for you, good sir.
例えば学校でものすごい手品を使う女生徒がいるって噂を聞いたことは？
Yeah. Be that as it may, it's very hard for him to pretty much come out and say that somebody managed to manifest an unconventional looking sword out of thin air.
いえ、ありませんけど。
さっぱり話が見えないわね。
Not at first.
何のこと？
例えば何もない空間から剣を取り出すような手品とか。
Okay, so I was wrong on that front. He was broaching the topic carefully, but Barn is definitely entering uncharted territory here. Yua raised her head with a jolt. Her expression was filled with shock.
どうしてそれ？
She knows something. Opposite her, Barn too put on a surprised face at her reaction, though he'd asked the question himself.
心当たりがあるのか？
After some hesitation, Yua nodded firmly.
どこで見た？
駅の近くの地下道です。
Ah, so she did tell Takumi to Ayase in the subway.
西条くんと岸本さんが。
フェスだな。それで？
Yua summed up the chase scene that had taken place about 2 weeks ago. How she'd gone to a manga cafe to see Takumi Nishijo. How he'd run away from her when she approached him a little coercively. How she'd frantically chased him through Shibuya. And how he'd lost her in the end. And just as she was ready to give up, she saw Takumi and Ayase entering the tunnel.
だから私、その階段の上から二人の様子をこっそり伺っていたんです。二人は階段の一番下で何か話していて。あ、どんなことを話していたかは聞き取れなかったんですけど。
So she could see them but not hear them.
そしたら、突然。
And that was when it happened.
岸本さんが剣を何もないところから取り出したんです。すごく大きな剣でバッグにも入らないような。
Indeed. But not that Barn would realize this, but there is something interesting about Yua's statement here that, well, I might be reading into this too deeply, but, well, I might as well just say it out there. If Ayase had real booted her sword when she showed it to Takumi that first time, then it should go without saying that anyone, you were included, would be able to see that sword, because of course it would be a part of reality in people's consciousness. However, that is not a D-Sword's default state of being. In other words, D-Swords can be carried by people like Senna and Kozue, but because they're not real booted in reality, only people with the power of a Gigalomaniac can actually observe them. So that brings up the following point. If Ayase hadn't real booted her D-Sword when she manifested it in front of Takumi's eyes, then there should be absolutely no way that Yua Kusunoki could even know what it was, much less see it, or rather the reverse of that. Basically, if Ayase had real booted it, then Yua would have been able to see it. However, if that hadn't been the case, then Yua could very well be a latent Gigalomaniac herself, which would be an interesting twist.
まさか。
Because there's no other way that she could see a D-Sword if it weren't real booted.
俺が見たものと同じだな。
Whereas in the case of Ban and Senna, Ban didn't see the sword until Senna real booted it herself to destroy the Noah 2 terminal, which explains how he could see it.
俺が見たのは岸本じゃなかったかな。さっき名前を出した青井瀬名っていう少女だな。実は葵が剣を振り回してたっていう目撃証言が渋谷のあちこちから出てる。
その手品、渋谷の若い子たちの間で流行ってるのかしら。
True, but most Shibuya youngsters are incapable of that particular sleight of hand, Mimose.
でも私が見たあれは手品にはとても見えませんでした。
That's because it wasn't a magic trick.
それに
他にも何か見たの？
信じてもらえるかどうかわからなくて、あの時岸本さんは剣を出しただけじゃなくて。
Yua cut herself off and slowly licked her lips. She appeared to be wavering over whether or not to say it. Her eyes swam around. At last she captured Ban in her sight as though she'd made up her mind.
二人に分身したんです。
Now that particular phenomena of the other Ayase Kishimoto, that was not Fiz's doing. That was Takumi's doing, not that Yua could know that.
まるで本当にその場に二人いるみたいでした。私、わけがわからなくて。
Ban is at a complete loss for words, as is Mimose. An oppressive silence filled the reception area. All three of them were embarrassed and unsure of what to say. And on that bombshell, it is time to end this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Head, and when we return, we shall see where the investigations of these three individuals carries them next. Nowhere good, I suspect. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.